And welcome to Outside 50, the new podcast for US footy news. Our special guest today is Christine Licata, the coach of the USA Freedom Team. Hey, Christina.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, doing really well. Christina, it's going to be a really big year for not only yourself, but the Freedom Team and US footy with the International Cup down in Australia. I guess you're pretty busy right now.
I definitely am. I'm really focusing in this off season before the USAFL season gets started up. Just having individual conversations with the 28 players plus six emergencies that I named to the team.
Yeah, I imagine it's keeping tabs with people all over the country as well is somewhat challenging. And I don't envy you doing that in this day and age, but it sounds good. So, Christina, we've known each other a long time, but I'll give our listeners some background. I'll ask some questions about how you came to the sport. Now, I know I first saw you down in Arizona, in Phoenix, and you went to Arizona State University. Tell us about that, and how did you get connected to the to football down there?
Yeah, so I was actually in my last year of university at Arizona State and was working at a restaurant down there. Met my partner in crime to this day, Andrea Casillas, who is a huge driver in women's football in the United States. And she had known a guy who was on the Arizona Hawks men's team, and his wife was interested in starting a women's team down there, and so went to a first practice with her and was just hooked immediately. So that was back in 2005 when there were three women's teams in the nation, one being yours with the Atlanta team.
Yeah, so it was basically Atlanta, Arizona Hawks, and there was a sprinkling of players from Milwaukee, but the Florida team was probably the other team in the midst there. So coming down to the first practice and game, were you surprised by the game, and what did you like about it from the outset?
Well, I had always been a huge American football fan, and I think just similarly, you can only play that to a certain point in the United States, and that was certainly the case for Australian football back when I started playing. The same in Australia. And so I actually always wanted to play a contact sport, and so was excited about the tackling and the contact that the sport offered, and really just found it exciting because there were so many new skills to the game, and it was super challenging to learn how to kick and hand pass and just understand the flow of the game. So you have to sort of be good with not being great when you first start, which is sometimes challenging, I think.
Yeah, I think it's been a challenge for a lot of the women players, especially over the course of the development, is getting used to the contact. You either love it or you hate it, and there's not much in between. So it's certainly part of the game that is very attractive, as you say, and also not so for many others. So even before that, you came from Pittsburgh. What was growing up in Pittsburgh like?
I mean, I think that's where my passion for sport comes from. When you grow up in Pittsburgh, pretty much everyone is a Steelers fan, a Pirates fan, a Penguins fan. And so, was really inundated with sports from the beginning of my life, and had a huge family there, and it's just a great town. I still love going back there today.
Did you grow up with siblings? Did your siblings play sport?
So I did grow up with siblings. A sister, 2.5 years older than me. She wasn't necessarily super involved in sports as much as I was.
Well, let's get on to the freedom stuff now. Most people probably don't know that you're a level two AFL accredited coach. Tell us about how that eventuated and where did you take that course? Was it here in the US or back in Australia?
Indeed. I hung up my boots in 2013 after unfortunately going through my second ACL surgery. I had moved to New York in 2008 and started the local team, women's team here with Drea. After that injury, wanted to understand how what my place was in this sport, and our coach at that time was moving back to Australia, and so in 2014 I took over the head coaching position, got my level 1 certification, and then in 2015 the USAFL actually offered a level 2 certification, and that consisted of some video courses that you would go through, and then pretty much a year long process where I documented every training, every game, every lineup, reflected on all of that. Had to come up with my coaching philosophy and really be detail oriented in terms of tracking everything that I was doing. The experience was definitely intense. I got a mentor. And really had to be self-reflective as a coach. And I think that I've taken what I learned in that course with me. There were about 6 of us, I think, who participated in it, and I ended up being the only one to finish the course, and became the first American, man or woman, to become level 2 accredited, which just was a huge accomplishment for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We won't name those other 5 or 6 individuals who are in that course with you, but so you obviously are passionate about the game and follow the game back in Australia. Who have you maybe garnered some of your coaching interest in back there, and how many games have you actually gone to and listened to coaches?
Yeah, so I would say because of my proximity and involvement in the New York Magpies club as the head coach, I've really learned a lot from the coaches throughout the history of the men's club and of the women's club. And so Rob Oliver, who was just a legend back in the day for the New York Magpies, was someone who I really looked up to. And in 2009, when I went with you to Australia for the first time, had the opportunity to meet with Shiloh Curtis, who was really one of the forerunners of women's football in Victoria, and have been able to stay in contact with her, and have, garnered a lot of advice from her. And I think luckily, living in New York, we get a lot of visitors here, and so have had the opportunity to uh, you know, meet with a lot of AFLW players who have given me advice. And I would say the last person that has really driven my continued development has been Ron Watt of the AFL Coaches Association in Australia.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to be, like you said, the only level 2 coach here in the US, that's pretty special. I might have to get you to come down here to Georgia and do some coaching for us.
I would welcome it, Kraz.
So you've been on to international tours before. You've got one coming up this year as a head coach. That's a huge responsibility, and a camp coming up in a couple of months. Tell us about that, and tell our listeners where it is and what they can look forward to.
Yeah, so being part of this program, first as a player and then as a development coach, was just really an amazing experience, and I learned a lot from coaches like John Ironmonger, Barnesy, Troy, who were the coaches of the Freedom beforehand. And so I'm carrying on a lot of the great things that they built in this program. um, when I took over the program as head coach in 2018, um, part of my decision making here was that I want to compete when we go to the international cup. And so have created a system where I've given a lot of access to players in terms of learning and education from the national coaches, and have gone from a list of 125 players to 54 on a training squad, and then finally the 28 who we'll be bringing to the International Cup. And so in May, we'll be traveling to Sacramento. We'll have the International Cup team along with the emergencies there. But in addition to that, players who made the training squad will also be invited to that camp. And I've spent a lot of time reviewing nationals footage from all of the games there, which was just a great resource for me. And the coaching squad has decided to form an all-star team from players around the country who have not been involved in the program in the past. So that can be Australian players, American players, because we really want to increase the level of competition that the Freedom team is facing prior to traveling to Australia.
So with the camp in Sacramento, were you expecting to play full on practice match type scenario? And how many of those and what else will you be doing?
Yeah, so we'll launch the camp with just the IC team on Friday and focus a lot on lines and strategy, and team building, and really working together to form some camaraderie. We're doing a lot of that remotely right now, which is great. So we have a speed dating thing going. All the girls are already talking, which is really great, and sort of meeting up with everyone every week remotely, and watching some AFLW and having a game of the week that they then talk about. Um, so just continuing to build that camaraderie is going to be important, especially since we're a remote team. So we'll do some team building over the weekend. In addition, on Saturday and Sunday, we're going to play full matches with the all-star team as well as the training squad players. So we're looking to play 18 aside on a full field, 4 quarters, and really just get a lot of game time in so that the team can be as cohesive, on the field as they are off the field.
So a lot of the national coach or even any coach really relies a little bit on testing, especially when it comes to aerobic capacity and things like that. And do you include any of that sort of testing, or have you included any of that in this program?
Yeah, so our approach to selection has been very data based from the beginning. So, with our camp in March of 2019, we actually did skills testing and fitness testing. So, things like the handball test, kicking test, goal kicking test, the fitness stuff, the yo yo, which everyone loves, 20-meter sprint, also agility tests, jumping tests as well. And so we've been tracking players' improvement from that, from the March camp to the August camp. At this particular camp, we will likely forego the skills testing because we've already picked our squad, but want to ensure that our fitness is still up to speed, and we're going to travel to the International Cup as one of the most fit teams the on the field. And so we'll be doing the fitness testing during the camp. And I have to give credit to our group of coaches who have put together, especially Ram, who is our strength and fitness coach. He has just put together a really good program for strength and conditioning, as well as a good running program for the girls.
So just taking an individual player, what are they expected to do at the moment each week in regards to running and gym work? Do they have, can you explain one of their schedules?
Yeah, definitely. So we have actually tried to get this as technologically savvy as possible. So the team is really running on a Volt Volt app is what it's called, and so that is where our strength and conditioning program is at. And so through that programming, they do blocks of 3 weeks, and that focuses on one specific thing. So that could be things like power or speed. And the program ranges from anywhere from 2 to 4 days on the strengthening side, and that just depends on the level of activity outside of the running and strengthening program that these athletes are doing. And then we have a running program that is 2 to 3 days a week and gives a bit of flexibility in terms of what types of runs our athletes are doing. And then every week on Monday, we have a Monday run day. So everyone's training remotely by doing that together on Mondays.
Wow. It's come a long way since I used to hold a stopwatch and just do the 3K time trial, that's for sure. So you've got 28 players you're taking down, and probably your coaching squad is numbering 3 to 4 or maybe even more, and some support staff. That's a pretty expensive trip from all the way over here, and especially if anyone's on the east coast of the USA. What sort of fundraising are the players needing to do to support this trip? And have you had any partners in regards to that, or any special events?
Yeah, so we're definitely continuously looking for sponsors and support from our community. It's a huge financial ask for both players and support staff to travel to Australia, and so we've put together a fundraising committee made up of players, which I'm overseeing, and hoping to get creative on how we can begin fundraising for this. All in, players are going to spend probably around 5K, 4 to 5K each. And so, whatever we can do to lessen that financial burden is really important to me. So some of the partners that we've had thus far, Aaron Phillips kindly donated a signed jumper to the Freedom, which was really great, and we auctioned that off at nationals. We're definitely exploring a number of different sponsors, and we'll be coming up with a rally up campaign shortly, where friends and family in the USAFL community can donate to the USA Freedom.
Cool. So let's talk about the IC down there. It's up in Queensland and near Maroochydore, and a little bit warmer climate this year than being in the cold climes of middle of the Melbourne winter. That would probably suit the US team a little more than some of the other teams, you think, because we'd be coming off a summer here. Um, any expectations there? It's going to be a little bit more friendly for the US players rather than having to play in really cold conditions, which we rarely do here.
Certainly, I think because our season runs through the summer for the majority of the time, um, we are definitely used to playing in hotter climates and weather. And so, that was part of the impetus of actually having the camp in California as well, because I want to simulate the kinds of conditions we're going to have at the International Cup.
Great idea, great idea. And there's obviously quite a few players down in Australia already, and some are likely to be already on your squad. This podcast will probably come out after the weekend here, and we have all heard about Danny Marshall playing with Footscray AFL women's team this weekend. What are the rules in regards to Australian-based players for the International Cup? And let it touch on the Danny's involvement down there, and how is that benefiting the US women's program, do you think?
Yeah, so I just think it's a fantastic effort from her and a real historic moment to be the first American woman named to an AFLW squad. So we are certainly very proud of her. In terms of the rules for the International Cup, there is a limitation to how many Australian-based players can be named to the squad, and ultimately, if those players are playing on an AFLW team, it will be up to their coaches, to allow them to play in the International Cup or not. So we're definitely crossing our fingers that Danny will be able to participate with the USA Freedom. Um, in addition to her, we have a number of other Australia-based players who have made the IC squad and are playing in both Melbourne and Northern Territory right now. And so, one of those being Rosemary Clough, who is the captain of the squad. And I think that the level of football that you get there when you're playing there, just the frequency you're playing at and the frequency of training is incredibly important, and you just see the development of these footballers catapult when they go there for even a short amount of time.
Yeah, getting back to the rules there, I guess we need to define what is an Australian-based player because there's probably a lot of players over there, and then this is guys as well who are just there for a temporary work visa or travel visa, and they wouldn't be regarded obviously as residents. So, um, do you know a little bit how they define what is an Australian-based player as opposed to someone who's just visiting for a period of time and getting experience?
Yeah, so they actually have two different sets. And that is based on the amount of time that a person has been living there. So I don't think that it will be an issue for anyone who we've named to the team this go round, but could likely come into consideration for our trip in 2023.
Right. Well, obviously, we have the men's team down there with a similar size squad as well. Have you had any communication with Tom Ellis in regards to molding both teams together, perhaps for the camaraderie aspect?
Yes, definitely. So Tom and I have definitely been in touch, and we really see this as a Team USA trip, not a Freedom and Revos trip. So we're really looking forward to supporting one another and building that camaraderie across the teams.
Well, it's going to be a fantastic tour, I'm sure, especially up there in Queensland. The USA Freedom have at last International Cup in 2017 came fourth. Now, I guess there's obviously expectations that we can do a little bit better than that. What are you talking to the players about in regards to goals for the games that you're playing, or is it just the old one game at a time thing, or do we have we set ourselves a lofty goal for the 2020 IC?
Yeah, I think even if we set a lofty goal for the 2020 IC, it's always one game at a time. So I am really looking forward to these women going and competing as athletes as hard as they can and putting it all out there in every single game. And as a coach, I certainly want to see our improvement from previous years and believe that this squad continues to do the work in the interim, up to the lead to Australia to actually get that done. So they are just working hard on their fitness, their strengthening, their skills, and the coaches are really dedicated to the continued development on a remote basis. So, my goal will be to go and compete in that grand final.
Excellent. Good to hear. Good to hear. And I guess as the women's AFLW season would be well and truly over, we would expect some AFL scouts up there for the IC. Obviously, a lot of other international teams, the Irish especially, and Papua New Guinea have been some of the stronger teams. Uh, are any of the girls perhaps expecting that there's a further future in Australia for them after the International Cup?
I think that because we have had players like Katie Klatt go over there, like Jess Blecker, um, like Rosemary, like Danny, there's a very large range in terms of the level of talent that these players are bringing over there, right? And so, with that level of talent, I think expectations for those players change. But certainly, I think Danny has broken the glass ceiling, and we're definitely hoping that more American women are chosen for the AFLW squad, and I think that if players have the ability to go over there and the flexibility with their work lives and school lives to go over there and play. It's certainly worth it, and who knows? You could be the second American woman to be on an AFLW team.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I can't be, but Uh,
Yes.
and I guess also this interest in Americans playing the game, and we talk about a lot of people talk about Mason Cox, especially playing with Collingwood. The opportunities seem to be rising a little bit. That there may be an AFL game in uh, USA at some stage, or especially an AFLW game. I was listening to, I believe it was Peter Holden on the Women's Australian Rules Football podcast, talking about the possibility of playing a game over here. But Greater Western Sydney have shown a lot of interest in having a men's game here in California at some stage for points. So this whole international cup hopefully puts us further on the map to maybe introduce the sport to a wider community here in the US, where it is still pretty well unknown, unfortunately, after 20 years or so. But so that adds to the opportunities for also for all players here in the US, for that matter, for being included in these international cup games. So finally, who do you see as the biggest competitor down there for the IC? Is it our friends to the north in Canada? Is that one of the big wins we must do? Or is it the Irish or the Papua New Guinea girls?
Yeah, I think I definitely have my eyes set on both the Canadians and the Irish. I think the Irish are very much coming on strong. You see 15 women who are in the AFLW from Ireland, and they've just set up a program where they are getting women involved in Australian football from a younger age than we are actually doing in the United States. And so I think that gives them a bit of an advantage in terms of how many women are getting into the AFLW at this point. But I am not one to sort of disregard any team, so I see every team as a threat.
Yeah, well put there. Very, very politically correct there, Christina. Well, thank you very much for talking to us today on Outside 50. We certainly will look forward to the International Cup, and maybe we'll get a little report after the camp in Sacramento, and certainly post International Cup when you come home. We'd love to have you back on, and best of luck for the rest of the year. And we hope we bring home some hardware this year.
Me too, and would love to come back on and share more about our journey. And thanks so much for your time today. Really enjoyed it.
No worries, Christina. Cheers.
Outside 50 is brought to you with the help of Play Aussie USA. Play Aussie is the only place in the USA you can buy the famous Sharon football, a proud sponsor of the USAFL. Visit them at playaussie.com.